Hi. So for my midterm project, I am going to be discussing midterm topic number 4, which is just going to be taking a look at the concept of archetypes in mythology, giving some examples to that, as well as, let's see here, a working definition of myth, as well as how the function or purpose of myth for both us and ancient peoples, as well as finally using this working definition to um, relate archetypes into the mythic nature of these stories and, kind of relate everything. So, to start off, let's see here, I just want to give a quick definition of archetype. So, archetype is a universal symbolic pattern. Um, and so, related to myth, they are story patterns that show up time and time again. This applies to field mythology through the myth stories. And some examples I have of these archetypes would be Great Mother, which can be shown in From Chaos to King Zeus, as well as some other stories. And then another example of a archetype would be the Culture Bringer, which can be seen in White Buffalo Calf Woman. And so let's say for the Great Mother from Chaos to King Zeus, the Great Mother is Gaia. And so Gaia is basically the earth. It's everything that we know to be what we walk on, what we use, what we came from as people. And then so in this archetype does show up quite a bit in myths when it comes to a mother, a earth mother, all that. And so and the culture bringer. So from White Buffalo Calf Woman, we see this archetype show up a lot as well. But in this story, White Buffalo Calf Woman, she comes to the tribe and she teaches them all the ways. She teaches them sacred and religious rituals, teaches them how to cook the meat, how to do basically everything they need to do. And so this is Culture Bringer is an archetype that kind of describes how a person shows up in this myth, because in many other myths, a person does show up in that symbolic pattern of being a culture bringer or a great mother or a trickster or anything of those sorts. And so let's move on to, okay, one moment. Let's see. Actually, and then I do have some other examples relating to archetypes. And so these examples, one of the most well-used archetype would be the hero's journey. So many myths throughout time have included a kind of specific way of structuring their myths, and this includes a hero and their journey through finding themselves and kind of helping out their communities and becoming this greater being through their journey. And so one example is how Joseph Campbell wanted to describe it. He believed in the hero's journey, and he said, "It is always the story of the rugged individual who realizes his true nature through heroic struggle." And this quote is found in the Myth and Knowing book that we are reading in class. And let's see. And then another example is also Vladimir Prop, who focused on distinguishing between constant and variable elements. He found a constant being the hero's journey, saying that characters in fairy tales change, but their functions within the plot do not, as in and this was after much research of many myths. He basically said that all of them are a hero's journey. Of course, the people change, how they're represented change, the story, but the plot is always that hero's journey. So that is a huge archetype. And so let's see. So I chose as my working definition of myth that kind of bleeds into the archetype a little bit, is a story containing symbols and patterns concerning the history of a people and natural world phenomenon. So I chose this because I feel like a myth is, you can't really say if myth is true and false. We don't know. We cannot go back in time and see. So it is technically a story, but it is always concerning how we came about, how a certain culture came about. For example, let's say Pele, the fire goddess, for a part of Hawaiian myth. So she, or the volcano goddess, she So that is a huge cultural thing in Hawaiian culture. A lot of their stories are based off of this goddess and all that stuff. So same with, from myths here in the States, from myths in Europe, it all kind of describes where did we come from, where's my people from, which is a big question for people looking towards myth. Everyone wants to kind of know, well, where did I come from? Because we don't have those answers, and there's really no way to get them. So that kind of leads me into the function of myth. And so function of myth to me is making sense of our lives and giving them purpose or meaning. It's probably the biggest function of myth. We attempt to comprehend why we are the way that we are, and myth allows us to do that. So when we read these stories, we can relate to the feelings and emotions felt by the people in the stories that are also portrayed as human, as having these human wants, these desires. So if we have kind of something that we can grasp onto, it's definitely, I would say, comforting for a lot of people, because it's hard being in a place where you don't know. So for the section where the archetypes and myth kind of blend during the for the question of how well does the archetype concept help give us insight into the mythic nature of these stories we've been discussing. So I said archetypes resemble universal patterns of human nature. The archetype concept shows the collective unconscious of mankind, meaning no matter where one is from, we have experiences similar, if not the same, that shape our thoughts and behaviors. Myth represents experiences like birth, life, struggle, love, religion, survival, and just about anything you can think of that exists in the subconscious of every single individual. So these archetypes show up in myth because as humans who have created these myths, who have written down these myths from our ancient peoples, all of these humans, no matter where they were from, what culture they came from, they still had the basic emotions, feelings, and experiences that every single other human has gone through. As I said, like love or survival. Everyone has gone through these things. So of course we see these archetypes show up in these myths because people are putting their own experiences into these, and because we've all had these same basic experiences, they show up in myth, maybe through different stories, different characters, but these archetypes continue to show up. So I think that's about it. I think I got everything explained that I had to, so thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your day.